Hi, I'm Carly of gnarlycarleygaming, and welcome back couchside as I talk about board games. Today I'm going to be talking about a game that's hitting crowdfunding soon. It's a game based on a console game of the same name. Today I'm going to be talking about Terraria, the board game. So about a month ago, I had done a post that was essentially like, hello, I've been taking a break from social media, YouTube and Instagram, just to be present in my life and focus on mental health. But I had been playing a lot of games and was really excited to share them and excited to be back and engaging with new energy. I then immediately got a pretty wicked chest infection and was down and out for weeks. So as I returned to humanity when I started to feel better, one of my friends, Chris from Paperfort Games, brought Terraria over to my flat and played it with me. He had painstakingly made the prototype by hand, so I'll show some images of it, but it is very much the prototype. But we played through this sandboxy adventure game, and today I'm going to share my experience of what it's like to play Terraria and just a broad overview of what Terraria the board game is all about. Much like the video game does, the board game Terraria plops characters into a world for them to explore. Each game, this world will be newly generated, so exactly where different biomes exist and the parameters of the world will look different each time. But they always start off in the forest and explore out from there to see where everything else is and what exists, as well as they can look down into the depths of their world, much like Terraria the game, by digging and exploring down 5 layers of Earth. So you're plopped in this world, and what do you do? Well, the slogan of Terraria is something like dig, fight, explore, build, and the board game really centers characters around that slogan. It's a cooperative game, so players can all work together, but you can also do kind of whatever the heck you want. And there's different tracks for each of those points in the slogan. So there's a fight track, a dig track, a build track, and an explore track. And in each of these tracks are more progressively difficult tasks that the game is asking you to accomplish. If you're playing an easy game, your goal is in 7 days and nights to accomplish one of those tracks fully. So you have to progressively get stronger and better at digging as a group in order to achieve these big dig feats, or maybe you just have to fight harder and harder bosses along the way. But realistically, as you play and explore this game, you're going to do all of it. You just have to finish one of the tracks. You don't have to commit to one right away, nor do you all have to go in the same direction. So when I played with Chris, we did it on easy, and I was most enchanted with digging. I really wanted to explore down into the world. So first thing I did is I dug into the earth, and I accomplished a couple of the early goals and then just kind of let that track build from there. But you kind of have to do a bit of everything anyway if you're familiar with the regular game, because all of it supports each other. So for instance, to get better at fighting, you might want to make better weapons, but to get better weapons, you have to explore in order to find minerals that you need, that you might have to mine in order to forge those things. And we'll get into how you do all of that. But realistically, you're going to be kind of advancing in all of these ways and just trying to figure out what path can get you there so you can exceed and ultimately win in 7 days and nights. And if you're doing a harder difficulty where you're achieving more than one track, maybe 2 or even 3, you are really going to try to push to advance in all of these ways while also kind of doing whatever the heck you want. What I really enjoy about it is the tasks lend themselves quite naturally to what you're already inclined to do, which is kind of the leveling up of each of these different ways in which you can exist in the game. So now, how do you do all these things? How does the board game work? In the video game, you can just do things. You can walk and explore and dig and all of those things. So how does the board game make all of this happen? Well, in the board game, you have those 7 days and nights, and each period of a day and night, so that like 24-hour period, is broken up into 7 rounds. Each of these rounds will see players have an action phase as well as enemies have an action phase. And during that action phase, players will draw cards equal to their hand size, which starts off as 4 and can build from there if you have like cooler bits of armor, other things you find that can level up your hand size. But you draw these cards And cards can vary a little bit. Some of them have special abilities, but most of them just have these little green circles that are essentially an action point. It's just you get to do something with that action point. And at the beginning of the game, these are pretty standard. One action point can let you move a space. One action point, because if you have a pickaxe, can let you dig, like one dig, or 1 point towards chopping down a tree, and trees might have like 1 or 2 difficulty to chop down. So it's pretty much like do something, and every activity takes a different amount of action points to do. As you level up in the game, this will shift, notably based on the items you have. So as you chop, as you dig, as you explore, all of your items will tell you how many action points actions afford you. So for instance, in the beginning of the game, you might have a pickaxe that says 1 action point gives you like 1 dig value. But later, if you upgrade to a better axe, you might have 1 action point gives you 2 dig value or even 3 dig value, basically making your action point more efficient because you're getting better at a skill or have a better tool in order to use it. So these cards kind of guide you. Some of them give you kickbacks to other teammates or help you heal. And some of them even give you money, which is a resource that you can use to just buy cooler cards to fill into your deck. Whenever you run out of your deck, whether that's your starting deck and anything else you've added into it, you shuffle up and then just keep drawing. So basically, every player, every turn, will go ahead and draw a hand size, and we coordinate who wants to go first. And we'll just like rotate through, use up all of our action points to do whatever we want in this big sandboxy world. After that, once we're all done with our actions, any enemies that have line of sight to us, that can see us and are going to interact with us because they're after us, will do so. And the game provides this nice bestiary that basically goes through how each enemy moves and how they attack. And also, we can attack, we can move towards them and do so. And that brings us kind of to the bigger action, which is the fighting system in the game. Now, fighting is one of the pathways. It is not the only pathway, and while you may not choose to go down a huge fighting rabbit hole, just like all of the other pathways, you typically need them in order to build up no matter what you're going for. So for instance, one of the main things that you'll fight, at least that I fought in the forest biome, were all of these slimes, both on the surface as well as deep down. And that can give you like a slime resource that's useful in building and advancing up in other categories. So whether or not I'm going to be a fighter, I might be like, okay, let me fight this so that I can build this, and then I'll avoid the rest of them. And so you're going to do a little bit of everything, but how you coordinate and who does what is kind of what your team will build up together. I didn't really want to be a major fighter. I kind of wanted to be the big digger. So we kind of suited up Chris to be more of that fighter early on. And then I helped because my digging let me have cooler weapons and armor. So then I became a little better at it and just kind of came into the fold to help afterwards. But fighting will always be something you need to do. So they wanted to keep the fighting system really straightforward and simple, because the last thing you want is to have a fighting system that like bogs down your game. So when you fight, everyone has an attack value and a defense value, which is basically just a die that you get to roll. So you start off as a very simple character that just gets to roll 1d4 for attack and 1d4 for defense. And you always just compare that to the baddie that you're fighting's attack and defense. So let's say I'm roll a d4 and I get a 3, and the baddie I fight gets 2d6s and rolls a 2 and a 3. Well, if my value at least matches the highest value of any of the dice they roll, you're only comparing the highest ones, then it's successful. The attacker always has that little bit of advantage. But if I rolled a 3 and they got a 6, because they can get up to a 6 on one of them, then I would just fail that attack and wouldn't deal that 1 damage. So it's very straightforward. It's pretty much comparative. For if I had multiple die, for each die that I have that is a higher value, I get a hit off of. And everyone has different wounds and damage, including us. We're pretty straightforward. 1 damage is 1 damage on our health track. But if you ever die, you get a number of basically respawns, like a video game, which will take you back to the forest biome unless you make a cooler house somewhere else. And so in that way, it's very much like a video game in terms of you're playing, but you have a little bit of leeway in terms of life to build back up. So that right there is kind of the game in a nutshell. You're exploring, walking around through these worlds. You're going to be digging into tunnels down to explore, fight different monsters, like loot different treasures. The looting treasures part, I think, is a part of the game that's super straightforward, but really delightful to me. There's different treasures hidden, particularly underground, though there's some above ground too, that are at different level chests. And when you get them, you basically pull cards matching that biome and that level to see what you find. So things are very thematically generated. And the higher value of chests, the more card options you have to basically pick what you want to loot. And some of these things are cards that you are incredibly powerful that you only get with chests. You can't buy them otherwise. So it's like really amazing action cards or really cool items. The coolest thing I found was an item that let me essentially use the resource mana. It was basically like a magic item that gave me every day, basically, I could use mana in order to attack instead of using action points. So making me a particularly voracious fighter, which is when I leaned into the fighting path because I had a little bit of boost behind me in it. But what you can dig and find is a really delightful little mechanic without really bogging down the game. I always love like the surprise of a new game, and it keeps a game fresh because game to game you don't know what you're going to get, and you can't reliably say in this corner this chest is always this. It's different from game to game as you play. So there's looting and adventuring and mining. There's a lot of nods to what the video game offers, and the world feels very much alive. So one thing they did, for instance, is if you chop down a tree, it's not permanently gone. Each day it will regen, but like in the game, you plant an acorn in order to regrow a tree. So in the board game, what you do is when you chop it down, you denote it by putting this little acorn token on it. On the next day, it'll be taken off, saying that tree is now like available again to be chopped down. So the world kind of ebbs and flows with you. The night and day cycle exists in the rounds, but it doesn't take much maintenance to maintain. There's certain creatures that will come out specifically at night, especially on the surface, and can be a little scarier. So you're going to be mindful of the night while still navigating the things that you're trying to do. Other cool bits that I found really delightful about the game are the crafting system. So in general, you're going to be exploring and gathering resources, and you'll build things like structures that allow you to forge and give you respite from creatures. But the forging is pretty cool. So with different structures, you're able to craft different types of items. So one of the first things I tried to do was create a structure that let me kind of go for the next item up. You start with like copper items, and I wanted to make iron items. And the pathways kind of push you there too. There'll be things that'll say things like make a non-copper suit. So I'm like, okay, I already want to do that. I think it'll give me a boost. Let me do this now. So I'll get the resources, forge the structure, then get resources so I can build this suit for myself. And it might do things like increase my defense. I can make a sword that'll let me fight better and increase my offense, or a pickaxe that lets me continue to mine better, and then I can make all those other things. And so it all feeds into itself in a really delightful way. But I found the making armor particularly delightful because when you do, you get these little armor that lays over your character so you can like suit them up in it. And it fits over all of them. It's like this little transparent sheet that you can slide in so you can adjust your stats and see yourself kind of decked out in these derpy armor. And it starts off with there's like this wooden armor that's like really clunky and silly, all the way up to this molten armor that you basically have to explore like the very depths of the biome in order to get that like molten lava that can make you impervious to these things, but is really, really difficult to get to. But then you look like a complete badass rocking it. And so whatever kind of delights people in the world, they can kind of shoot for. There's also nods to things in the game that I think are really fun. Like one of the things you can try to do is if you go down into like the depths of the world, one of the things that can help you come back up is a rope that you can make from cobwebs and kind of attach to the outside, and you can climb up as far as like the rope will go in a straight line. It basically just extends down. And so in the game, you basically can send it all the way to the bottom, like underworld, and they call it like a elevator if it goes from the surface straight down. And the dig path eventually gives you basically like a boon and a track to make like a full-on elevator, which is just like a nice nod to the community within Terraria, but also is a really fun thing to achieve. And I think that's what I like about the game is like it doesn't just push you towards beat this, do this, build this, but it's a very fun process to get there, and you can get there however most fun for you and your crew. You always have like goals that are pushing you to do things, but you can kind of do them the way that feels good to you. And so yeah, I was really delighted by it. I found it really adventure filled, super easy to get into. There's a lot of content there and a huge expanse of a board. I'm gonna throw in a picture that just shows you how big this board can get. It's unlikely that it would get that big when you do it, but just how like expansive this world can be. And I just found it like stinking charming. And so if you're a co-op kid looking for adventure, happy to have some generated silliness and a world that truly feels like open to explore and not immensely restrictive, I think Terraria is a real treat, and I'm excited to see it fully come to life. The prototype is quite simple, but there's going to be trays to help organize everything, and I think it's going to be like a stinking lovely project. If you have any other questions about my experience playing the game or what the final will be like, I'm going to showcase pictures in this video that are largely the prototype. So if you want to see more of what the game has to offer, I'll include links to the campaign below. But otherwise, that's been like my first big game since coming to life again, and I'm very excited to be able to share it with you all. And Chris and Paperfort are wonderful folks, so check out their campaign if it's something that interests you. Otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you for the next video.